All righty. Welcome, everyone. I'm Lisa Dalton, and I am excited to welcome you to our Michael Chekhov Master Teachers Speak. And with that, we will continue with our a little bit of conversation here, helping the people who join us on Zoom here get a little bit more of a handle on what we're doing. So I'll just give you a little bit of a background on how this came about. I'm Lisa Dalton. I'm president of the National Michael Chekhov Association, and I have been working with Michael Chekhov's technique for almost 40 years, and had the honor of meeting Joerg Andres in 1992 when he created the first international Michael Chekhov workshops. And we have been colleagues since then. And this past summer of 2019, I had the honor of being a student of many of Joerg's students, as well as offering them some of the work that I brought together. And in the last several years, Joerg and I have been reconnecting and collaborating, and I'm in deep appreciation of his work, and I believe we have a mutual understanding with our own creative individuality regarding the Michael Chekhov technique. So I kind of got this image that sort of appeared in my brain about creating a series of dialogues with master teachers. And I wanted to begin by working with Joerg. And here is Joerg Andres. So welcome, Joerg Andres and Mr. Joerg. You are live, you're unmuted, so come and say hello. We have 17 participants on the line.
Oh my God, I'm
very excited to have you here.
The people are better with the technical things, so I'm not so such a great person with it. Okay. Hello. Hello. Who do we have here? That's wonderful.
Hello, Mac. Welcome, Diana. We're really excited that everyone's here. And Joerg, I've just been telling them a little bit about our background in terms of our meeting in '92, and a little bit about my work with you this summer, and just a touch about my background, and turning it over to you and sort of what it is that we're interested in bringing forward in this Michael Chekhov Masters talks.
Okay, Lisa. Hello, everybody. I'm Joerg. In case you have seen me before.
Hi.
Good. If not, then you have seen me now. Okay. I'm very surprised and very, in this way, how to say, lucky that I can meet Lisa in this great distance, even now, here. And so let's see what we can bring forward.
Fantastic. So let's begin with a question. Who has a question that you would love to hear some thoughts on? Anyone? It is possible to raise your hand under, if you're on video, you can sort of wave like that. And you also can unmute yourself. You will be muted. And it is possible to raise a hand when you look at the, in the Manage Participants link. There should be an opportunity for you to raise a hand. So, all right, I have a question. What is my question? And my question to Joerg will be, what is the most satisfying part of sharing Michael Chekhov's work with colleagues?
Lisa, you are funny to ask such things. I can't speak about colleagues here now. No, to share the Chekhov technique to other people is that it is very much opening some of the artistic background of everybody. So with that, what we know from Joseph Beuys. So I need a little bit to shake. Here is my thing. I would like to give you this little phrase from Joseph Beuys. And when you come with this question, then I have to give you this phrase. Wait a moment. That's really live. And you see, you can swap to you, Lisa. Yeah, very good. So here we are. So people, I like sometimes to be chaotic. So the point is what I find so important. You see, maybe here's this Joseph Beuys phrase. I can read that. Art alone makes life possible. This is how radically I should like to formulate it. I would say that without art, man is inconceivable in physiological terms. That was a bad English, I know. I would say man does not consist only of chemical processes, but also of metaphysical occurrences. The provocateur of the chemical processes is located outside the world. Man is only true alive when he realizes he is a creative, artistic being. Man is only truly alive when he realizes he is a creative, artistic being. Even the act of peeling a potato can be a work of art if it is a conscious act. So that's a point, that's the most satisfying thing. First, to have it explored by myself a bit, and second, that I try to open it and to deliver some ways that even other people who have the question for it can open up in this direction.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So that was Joseph Beuys, and maybe not everybody is knowing Joseph Beuys, but you can check it on the web.
Very good. I see we have 26 participants, so I just want to welcome everyone who's just joining us, and very excited that you're all here. We're asking questions. If you have a question, you can, if you have video, you can flag your hand and we can unmute you and hear your question, and or you can enter it into your into the box here, and one of the questions that we have is from Ksenia, I think on the iPhone it says, could you please share your story of the first application of Chekhov technique? So I'll start with that. And with that, I first met the technique when I was cast in a play that was calling for actors who were mime actors. And I had just completed 4 years of performing with the Bond Street Theater, which is still very vital today. And it was a very, very physical theater with very Grotowski based and mime, juggling, circus arts, and yoga, gymnastics, stage combat. And I had left the company because I needed to, I wasn't available for some of the performances because I was increasing my work in film. And I suddenly, after 4 years of being with a company, was unengaged in the evenings. So I went to this audition, and the audition, I got cast in it. It was a 3-person play, and it was a full-length novel based on a British novel from 1918. And the script had the words on one side from the novel and movements and explanations on the other with no dialogue. And the director, the other actor, and myself, the director played one of the characters. The 3 of us worked for 4 months on creating a fully propped, fully costumed production with no words. It had piano music, and every moment had he had me like sending energy. And I remember he had me doing these, I would do these gestures, and then he would have me not do the gestures and just imagine that I was doing the gestures. And I remember I had something right here in my shoulder, and I had a movement that kind of was sort of crunching down, and I didn't know what all these things were, and he didn't tell me what they were. I just knew that even though I had done about 1,000 performances in the 4 years before this, that this work that I was doing was the best I'd ever experienced. And later on, one of my clown partners informed me that what I was talking about was Michael Chekhov's work, and gave me to the actor. And that's when I sought training. So that's how I first experienced the technique. I learned atmospheres, and I learned centers and gesture and qualities of movement, sensations, without knowing any of the names. And I knew it was completely transformative. So, Joerg, your turn. How did you come upon, what was your first experience?
My first experience was a question. Living in East Germany, a friend from America was asking me if I know Michael Chekhov, and I didn't know. And then he brought me the first German translation of To the Actor abroad, and I studied with a book in my hand in my living room in East Germany, and was very much surprised what it did to me. I was really surprised that it started to change in me, in my body, in my sensations and my feelings. And I started to share it with my a colleague, an actress. She was in a street theater group in East Berlin. And then I was sharing all my experiences with her and working with her, and then working with a theater group, and did my first directing with the Chekhov technique just in the process when I was studying it for myself. So that was my first experience with it. And since this time, I tried to stay with it.
Can you tell us about when that was?
That has been in the early 80s, 1980, I don't know, 2 or something.
Mm-hmm. Yes. right. My play was the end of 1980, the beginning of 1981. So very similar time.
Yeah, yeah.
Very similar. There's a question. It's Lisa and Joerg. You worked together a few times. What can you say are the differences in your grasp of the work and in teaching?
Looking to the differences, that's very funny. Okay, it's very good. We can look to that. Lisa, do you have one idea? What are the differences? It's very, very hard to say because now I see Lisa here and then she is listening to me and she sees the differences also, what I think about it. We have had talks more about what is our common understanding about some of the tools and some of the backgrounds. I think what I, from my German point of view, would say, Lisa is very American and very American in the style and very fast and in a way that she is with kind of a very strong radiation pushing everything forward. So the strong willpower, basically the willpower moves the people and moves her radiation. And in this way, she can reach very fast a lot of results. This is not so much what I can do. My results come later, come a little bit slowly. And my willpower is not so directly pushing the people forward, only sometimes in strange moments. Maybe this is one difference. And of course, I'm not I don't do it American-like. Lisa, what would you say?
Yeah, well, I think you captured it really well, Joerg, really well. Absolutely, I definitely work at a very sort of American rapid immersion kind of pace, and I would say that I definitely utilize a lot of will to radiate an intention to ignite or activate or inspire passion and excitement for the material and the possibility of applying and utilizing the work. And my observation and perception of your work, Joerg, is that it contains more on the thinking realm and the feeling realm in terms of sensing. You as a teacher work on sensing very almost intimately, I might say, of where are the thinking forces and the feeling forces of the participants in, are they getting the more subtle nuances of the work, the refined use of the pathways for activating activity in the self, a slower, gentler pace that allows it to permeate in a different way, that accumulates then in a different way. And this is what I think is one of the most exciting things about the work that we share is it's kind of like two polarities that I go around the work sort of bang, going back and forth over the material, very quickly apply it, learn it, play with it, apply it, learn it, play with it, apply it, go back, do that again, go back, do that again, and build up an understanding on a very deep level over a period of time through repetition of the same sequences, where Joerg's work, while I'm going back and forth like this, Joerg's work is slowly building unit by unit by unit by unit by unit by unit. So we wind up in this common point where our participants who have taken the time to go through these units and or taken the time to repeat this larger chunk arrive at a similar place, which I believe for both of us, one of the things we share in common is that when someone completes the training that we offer in its extent, it's that, for example, our mutual certification programs. When you've completed those programs, you have a feeling and you have a will and you have a thinking force and a spiritual force that is ready, feels ready to bring the work forward. So our uniquenesses are demonstrated in the actual structure of our certification tracks, where in Joerg's is coming back and doing section by section, and mine is repeating the same section multiple times and creating a project utilizing it. So yeah, so I hope that answers that question there. Let me see what else is here. Just check the gallery. Does anyone have a question you want to ask? So I'm going to follow that question up, Joerg, with let's talk a little bit more about some of the other commonalities that you and I share in our work.
This I didn't get now. What was it?
So you and I have spoken a bit about what we do share in common. So shall we talk a little bit about what brings you and I together?
Oh, this is a question. What brings us together? First, that we met very first time on the first International Michael Chekhov conference, and that we had from this point on basic understanding. And another point maybe is at least many of the details of the work and in the details of the understanding of the work, that it is in many details, how to say, very important to be on the point, and that this work has a deep, always real connection with the willpower, with the imagination, and with the sensation. So that's a different field, but for the training, that there is a center point to have always the sensation for that what one is doing. And this is in the middle field, I would say, but the work has to work with the imagination, and that the body work is connected with this sensation of that what we are doing. This is one point. And how we understand with, from the point of imagination, how the work goes more in this detailed imagination, what I'm doing, how I'm doing it for the sensation, and that I can do it. So that's one point, but we have discussed, for instance, archetypal gestures, and we have discussed some terms, and we have also discussed this question about the four kinds of movement. What is a kind of a Twitter term, because the kinds of movement are on one side really training elements for the psychophysical training, for the artistic body. On the other hand, one can use them as qualities. What is then a different aspect of them? So in this field, we had a very good understanding to clarify some of that points. And I think also in the work of the psychological gesture, how it works as an inner movement, this question is one point we are, as far as we have discussed it, and many points agreeing, and open up for us different detail aspects when we were speaking about. What do you think?
Yes, I agree with all of that, and I would include that inevitably the question of Rudolf Steiner's work enters into the field of training, as both you and I bring it forth, and that is not the case for many people. And so I do think that commonality is deeply relevant to our understanding of the elements that you've been referencing, because Mr. Chekhov was so deeply influenced by Rudolf Steiner's work. For those who are not familiar with Rudolf Steiner's work, their understanding of Michael Chekhov's work must be different. And I can say that the more I learn about Rudolf Steiner, and you've been involved in Rudolf Steiner's work before myself, but my own involvement since the early 80s keeps enriching my understanding of Michael Chekhov as I deepen my own practices as an artist and as a spiritual scientist, I come to understand how even more brilliant, how brilliantly Michael Chekhov interwove so many powerful healing concepts into his work. And I think you and I share in common a deep recognition and desire to support the healing aspects of the work in the way we bring it forward, and healing on all levels. On the physical level, understanding how balancing the elements of earth, water, air, and light, warmth, how that can enhance our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual health, as well as provide us these springboards into being able to convey the images that might be containing those elements. So I think our sense of passionate care for the whole human being that we work with is something that continues through the work, and I feel was in Mr. Chekhov's work and was certainly supported by the Steiner work. And I found more ways to support the participants the more I understood how Mr. Chekhov was reflecting certain elements of Steiner's work. So,
yeah, that's a very important point. That this background was, from our first meeting on, clear for both of us.
yes.
And of course, there were also some other in the first conference. But this understanding, this is one of the leading leading powers, one of the leading possibilities to understand that. And maybe this leads back to the beginning question we had. I think because I had done, before I met this book, I had done some eurythmy. I had done the speech training for myself. I was working in that field. And so when I did the exercises just out of the book, I had immediately a kind of a, how to say, a kind of a relationship to it, because from my feeling, I felt that it is connected. And this connection to Steiner was in this German translation of To the Actor, not so obvious as it is now in our time. But I did know it and I felt it immediately. And this is, of course, one thing what is connecting us, that we search in the direction of this deeper background of this spiritual relationship, spiritual understanding of the human being, and spiritual understanding of the art. That this is a point that we are focusing in the same direction to Steiner, and also try to understand how it is practically weaved in this, what Chekhov gave as the training program. Without that, I wouldn't say that without, as Chekhov's help by himself, I think had in mind that it's not the aim that everybody has to study Steiner, but on the other hand, this understanding of art and understanding of human being in this direction, this is something what we both try to deliver as a background for the Chekhov. The central for me is a creative part in the Chekhov work, and I have explored so much with it, in it, how it can work and how it works. And I have to say that the connection to Steiner, of course, was for me personal, absolutely helpful to can see this the next layers beyond the exercises itself.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I also, I experience this sense of us both having a breadth that goes deep into the roots and also extends into its expansive potential in how it's moving forward, how we can move it forward. And we also just this another concept that I feel we closely share, that's fairly unique in the community of long-lived teachers, master teachers certainly, is our mutual background in film and in making film and producing, directing and producing film and television. And and so we have this extensive stage and on camera to draw from. We have an interesting question here from Olivia. Could we share your experience of how you worked on a specific character? What were the obstacles and how to overcome them? Would you like to talk about that? Or shall I jump in and talk a little bit about Effie?
Oh, jump in.
Okay. So one of the things that came out of our international workshop encounter back in '92 was Joerg had this impulse to invite me to look at a script called Effie's Burning, and it's a British script by Valerie Windsor. And another actress, Dorothy, he wanted to direct the two of us. And it was an amazing role. And I really wanted to do it. And we did a reading in Berlin. And then we never were able to get me from California, Dorothy from New York, and Joerg in Berlin together to do it. So by about 1998 or so, I reached out to Joerg and said, I'm starting to get too old to do this part, so I need to do this part now. And can you give me some information? What did you envision? How were you working with it? And this play was very important to me because of Joerg's impulse to ask me to play this role. And his collaboration and my collaboration, it opened up a very important and significant part of my pedagogy that developed, has continued to develop. So this play is structured with 12 monologues, and in the middle of the monologues are 12 scenes with the other actor in a hospital room. And my character is a doctor, and she is an intern in the plastic surgery unit, and she is being picked on by her mentor, and the patient has been in the other room, has been burned, and has the mental capacity of an 11 to 13-year-old, and she's 67. And no one knows how she set the house on fire that she got burned up in, and she's mentally unstable. And so my boss basically makes me take care of this very difficult patient, hoping that I'll fail and he'll kick me out of the program. And this character, in her monologues, becomes the doctor, becomes her fellow co-workers, is speaking to a jury, and is talking on the phone to different people trying to find out what happened with this patient and how the burn started and what her history was. And so she switches into about 5 different modes or characters, actually becoming the doctor, other doctors. And so each character had to have its own imaginary body, its own psychological gesture, and its own center that tended to manifest in its imaginary body, its own tempo and rhythm. And so I was also directing it because I wanted to utilize the Chekhov work, and using Joerg's suggestions about the staging with the past upstage and the present in the center stage and the future downstage. And so I designed the set so that the phone where I would be calling people to find out what happened in the past was against the backstage, against the upstage. And then I used my boss, my nasty boss, who was very intellectually driven. I had him on the right side of me, and I'm more feeling oriented. So I would speak as the doctor from here and face here as my own character. But when I was speaking to the jury, I was talking about the character's future. So I came down and I was trying to persuade them. I was forcing my will in the center of the stage in the future. So down center was where I was addressing the jury, trying to convince them to help take care of this woman in the future. So these are very specific uses of the technique. And I remember Joerg on the phone helping me, and my psychological gesture, this is 20 years ago, so but it had something, it had to do with something that was stirring from the past and reaching forward, something like that. And that gesture of somehow helped me find this particular character and to stay in the I could use certain aspects of the gesture for certain sections of the play. And one of the rehearsal techniques that I did was, once I created the psychological gestures of each of the different characters or aspects of the character I was portraying, I would just do a drill where I would go from one, like my boss's gesture, to my colleagues' gestures, to my present gesture, my gesture of searching for the past, my gesture of working with the court, and drill them so that I could switch very, very quickly. And one time I forgot my lines, and I did the wrong monologue. I did monologue 5 when I was supposed to do monologue 3. And I got halfway through monologue 5 when I was on the phone in the back, and I realized that I was about to become my boss and tell me that I didn't get the job I applied for, when I realized I forgot to tell the monologue about applying for the job. And I was instantly able to start improvising, switching characters back and forth, improvising till I could find the right monologue and deliver it. And then when I came back, when I was supposed to actually do monologue 5, I had already performed half of it. I was again able to improvise back and forth in characters because I'd really drilled the technique. And in the end, it was pretty scary, but it was, the technique saved me, and nobody knew except the technicians that I had forgotten so much. So that's a long story, but that's I think a really good story about a specific use of the technique for a particular character. So Joerg, how about you? Do you have something that you'd like to share?
Yes, I hope it's not too boring. I do my improvisation performances, and actual, or in the last year, last year, and before, many years. And there is one very nice thing, is working with the inner gestures. And I did one time experiment, and I tried to open the show just by a silent and mostly not movement, just sitting on the chair and only working with inner gestures. And of course, the body has a little bit to react, and then at one point also the body movement changed, but I could manage it very nicely. It was, as I saw, it was working. So only the inner gestures, to speak only with inner gestures instead of the outer gestures. That was and is still a wonderful, great thing what I'm working with. Has to do with psychological gesture. It's not 100% the same, but it is in this field. And the earlier experience, maybe I can share that here, because some people I know here on the chat, and even they don't know that, so then they can hear something new from me. That was when I just in East Germany was rehearsing for a play what was going back to the early Christianity. So, and I had two parts in this play. One was a very old man, so I worked with an imaginary body. That was very exciting for me to explore this imaginary body, and could transform through that very much in this also for the audience. And then one other part, the second part, was what I like since this time, to play very dark people, bad people. And that was one of the dark person in this field of all the people around this Christianity time. And this was a very important point. I worked with the outer gesture and with the inner gesture, and I got this first evening, this let's say per accident, I got this amazing feeling of the divided consciousness. And I could repeat that for the second evening. And I could repeat that all the time, because I learned through that first time how it works, how I can create the conditions that it happens. And that was in this way so amazing, because I could see three things at the same time. Real seeing the full audience, even in the last row. And I could see the character from outside, and I could see myself playing the character and playing with the audience, with this breathing of the audience, playing with this surprise about this dark story the character was speaking about, and to manage that. And since this time, it is my deep belief that one can, with a Chekhov technique itself, really one can teach that divided consciousness for someone who is asking for it. It's not a mystery. It's a possibility to develop it artistically out of the training. And so that was a deep leading experience since this time. So this I never forget. And that was always leading in all my following work, to try to play with that state.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. We have a question about how to deal with skeptical students who try to follow that process, but are too afraid to really open up enough to receive all the love that's in the air. So not everyone can dive in the unknown and into the beautiful from the very beginning. It requires practice and exploration. which can show them the beauty of the experience. But how do we find the balance as a teacher to trust the process as well?
So that's not so easy now to speak about the teaching secrets. It's not a secret. It's on one hand, it's quite clear that there are at least 3 things. The first is for myself to trust that this person has a wish to become creative, and to believe that this student can become creative or can explore it in a fresh way, and that the person is creative, and that there is this so-called creative ego is present and want to do the work. And the skeptical things are very often connected with what one has in the past, or that some explanations, some thoughts or something what I give are not so purely immediately to understand. And so that's a part of me to make that a little bit also clearer. And the other thing is that not to fight against it, just say, okay, everybody has to work with that, what one has, and to accept it and not kill it, not fight against it, and try to integrate some new ideas or try out some new ideas. So radiating, hopefully I can radiate that I believe that this person can do it and will find it. And the other is that to be in contact with a person, try to see where the what was it, a skeptical people, where the skepticism comes from, and maybe I can find a way to help to show the other side of the skepticism, only to show, not to fight against it. One can't fight against it. One can say, okay, even accept it. It's good that you are questioning. One has to question, and one has to bring the new things in relationship to the experiences of the past. And this is a process, how the things transform. It needs time, and I trust this time. I believe in that the student will become able to manage it. That's my answer.
Yeah, I agree a lot with that. One of the ideas is to just go even more specific with the yes and process of affirming their skepticism and trying to sense or find, invite them to reveal in some way what the source of the skepticism is, as Joerg was saying. And one lens through which you can look at that is through the thinking, feeling, willing forces. Is it skepticism on the thinking level? Is it anxiety and fear in the emotional level? Is it something that comes out of their will force? And when you can, if you can begin to sense whether one of those 3 forces is predominating their skepticism, you can then approach what it is, the way that you might lead them, model for them, the stories that you might tell, the words that you use to encourage them, or the words in the questions. So just something simple like, what do you think would could happen here, or how do you feel this could work or not work, or what do you want to do since this isn't. So just choosing little languagings that can help get you speaking in their language so that they feel more comfortable and are ready to allow you to lead them. But the absolute trusting that their will to learn and grow is what got them in relationship to you. It's what got them to class, basically. So to really trust in that, like Joerg said, and also to really stay connected with your higher self and ask these questions of your higher self, of the individual, to do your own little inquiry, to see if some imagination or inspiration will lead you to connecting with them. So there. Joerg, somewhat, we're curious about what your main and most influence in terms of learning the technique. Who was your main and your greatest influence in learning the technique, and why?
Oh, why? Who was better? Does it mean from whom did I get it, or what? So the most influence was by myself in the beginning, and then I stepped out of this relationship, and then I had my wonderful teachers, Fern Sloan and Ted Pugh, and they gave me the main ground, the main influence. And through that, we're going back then to myself and was learning what I got from them, try to develop with my own again. So I mean that I started with a book alone for a long time, working through everything. So I was my own teacher, and it was funny enough. And then I met Ted and Fern, and it was very interesting to see the differences between my first teacher, myself, and then what they were delivering. And that brought something, built up something in a new way to understand that. And after this very intensive and very helpful and amazing time with them in New York, I came back to my old teacher myself and started with it. And the other point was then in Berlin, we had a very good period that there were some actors, some colleagues, and we were working every week together and did a training and an exploration work for many months, I think about years, 2 years was it working. And I can't be grateful enough to that colleagues that we had this work, the trying out, even when it not was always easy, but it was very important to have this exploration together.
Yeah. For me, I was, of course, heavily inspired by the director who gave me the work. That work with that director, Wilfred A. Hunt, gave me the understanding of what was possible in Chekhov's work. And then I spent about 6 years. I actually led Ted into teaching because he was a clown partner of my clown partner, who revealed to me that what I had done in the play was Michael Chekhov, and no one was teaching at the time that anyone could find, but she knew Ted she knew Ted had a relationship to the work. So we called up Ted, and we rented a studio and gathered actors for Ted to teach. And Ted's style of work at the time, Ted Ted wasn't a teacher yet. And so he said, I can't be your teacher, but I can lead you. And so we would just go to class, go to the studio, open a book, and he would read an exercise, and then silently we would work with it for 2 hours. And then we would go home. And I knew what it was all leading to, but other people didn't. So they didn't stay with the work. And I told Ted I wasn't going anywhere. I was sticking with him because I knew what the possibility was. And that's when he went over he found the space over at the Rudolf Steiner High School. And that's when Fern joined. So I worked with that group for the next 6 years or so. And then also with Ted when he went on to Beatrice Straight's studio. And so we worked very, very slowly, much more slowly than anyone can work today, because we didn't even do any dialogue for 2.5 years of training. And that way of training for me is completely the opposite from how I teach, right? But for me, it was highly influential because because Ted insisted he wasn't yet a teacher. He never gave us any feedback. We just did the work, and then we went home, and we never discussed it. We never talked about the concepts. We just explored them through our own way. So it was like, because I'd had Wilfred's directing and I knew how it could be applied, Ted created for us this laboratory where we could explore as a team, but by ourselves, basically. Mm-hmm. And that was that gave me the super, super deep time to explore. Mm-hmm. Then I spent 18 years with Mala Powers, teaching with her and helping her become a teacher. And by that time, I had also studied with Beatrice Straight and Deirdre Hurst Dupre and all the teachers at Beatrice's studio, and anybody then who could find. I studied with Eddie Grove. I searched for anyone who was offering the work to study with them. And that, when I brought that all together with my partnership with Mala Powers became the greatest mentor of my life. The greatest inspiration of my life. Her understanding of Michael Chekhov, her personal relationship with him, and her understanding of Rudolf Steiner's work, which she adopted through his inspiration, did the most to change who I am as a human being and how I understand the work and bring the work forward. So my work with Jack Colvin, who came in during that time, a very intense mentorship for 6 years, gave it another layer, introduced a whole other perspective on Michael Chekhov's work that also very strongly influences my teaching. So those three, Ted, Mala Powers, and then Jack Colvin, with Mala as that overarching, hands-on, being molded by her. So, yeah.
And not to forget, when I see that in the process, all colleagues I met, and when we had an exchange, even disagreements, were very, very helpful. And of course, all the questions of my students, all their not understanding all that resistance and all that blockades and everything what happened there, that was a great teacher on one hand, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe for me, because living in East Germany and getting the book in East Germany and starting in my own room, I had a precondition. I was when I was in film, I was a master student of Heiner Caro, and I have to say, through him I learned what does it mean to work with art. What is art? Mm-hmm. What is a deeper intention of art? He gave me the first ground to understand that. And then in my life in this time, there was another person. It sounds a little bit paradox, but this is how I think what art is always. There was a priest, and through him I learned about what does it mean, what is freedom. Wow. And so this was a ground, and on this basic, having a basic understanding what is art, and having a basic understanding through what is freedom through two very, very high developed people, that gave me then, when I met Chekhov, that was the next jump, and then I started with myself, and then I met Ted and Fern.
Wow, well, that's great. There's a question about, is there a particular book of Rudolf Steiner's that especially lends itself to deepening our understanding of Michael Chekhov and his technique? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question, and it, from my understanding, not possible to answer in this abstract way. I wouldn't do that because it's very individual. The way what is touching one person, what is related to the individual life situation, to the individual general situation. This is very important to respect that, and out of that to find the first book. And this is, from my understanding, I can only do it in a personal contact. If I get asked for that, sometimes I get asked. And on the other hand, I would say if anybody is searching for that, just go in such a bookshop and close your eyes and go with your hand to the, or whatever, and look and open up and see what is a book you will find then in the moment, and start with that, and out of that follow the questions.
Yes. For me, as I've been reading various things, it just, I couldn't pick a particular source, because it's just sort of afterwards that things start appearing in my imagination, and connections start forming, and it as you said, it has so much to do with, where I am as an individual at any given moment. So I don't even know if it would be obvious to anyone else, the connection that's appearing. Yeah. Had a question.
Can we also ask this people who are with us, if they have now a question in the meantime, or is it, I don't know how it works.
They're posting on the questions I'm asking. I'm reading their questions.
Okay.
So they're posting in the chat room.
Okay. So I can't see that. That's
you can open your chat box if you want. On the bottom, there should be.
Okay, then find the question.
But it is, what's your favorite tool? How do you approach it when you teach it? Oh, that's an interesting question. Favorite tool? Well,
I'm just looking here for that funny
yeah.
thing. I don't know where's the chat room. So okay, don't have it.
Okay.
You have questions. That's great.
So yeah. So favorite tool? Gosh, I have so much love for all of them, and I don't know. I get, one thing I get I always begin with teaching expanding and contracting as the most basic pattern of movement, and to me, it's just the grand archetype of all and everything else. Everything unfolds from it for me. All gesture comes from it, all quality, all tempo, rhythm, everything can be applied in that essential expanding and contracting process, the opening and the closing, and to teach it is really fun because for me, because it, uh, it whatever that first tool is that to a virgin artist who's not been exposed to Chekhov before, when I guide them through just mechanically doing opening and closing, expanding, contracting, and becoming aware of the impact that makes in their thinking and their emotions and in their body, and how different the responses can be in a group when you ask, what happened when you did this, what happened when you did that, and you get so many different answers and different images, different impulses of, I don't want to be there, I want to stay snugged in or whatever, and to help people realize how universal the pattern of movement is and how differently we can relate to it and all the possibilities. I love as a teacher watching the openings in the artists as they just begin to discover what the possibilities are. So don't know that I can narrow it to one, but that's one of them.
I agree with the very importance of expansion contraction, and especially as in a movement. But when we speak about tools, we have to speak about the toolbox. And the toolbox, and this maybe it's not so much the tool itself, but for me, when I have to say something like that, this is it's twofold. That's the imaginary center in the chest and the threshold. These are the grounds, and in that frame, in this field, all the other work happens. And this is for me one of the central starting points in this way. Yeah. This is a box, and in that every tool you learn to handle.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
We have a question from Marianna. By what means can you discover the objective of the character? And do we need this objective at all with the Chekhov method? Yeah. Well.
Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I think it's interesting. to consider this on many, many levels. And part of me absolutely can say we don't need objective, as objective has been taught in what has almost become a cliche fashion. In it it can mean tactic or approach, but if we say for me, it is very useful to say what is the problem, what is the character's problem, and there's always a deeper layer of, what the problem is. There's layers of the problem. I'm hungry. Well, what's the problem? I broke my leg, so I can't get to the to the refrigerator to get food. Well, that can be a very superficial thing. If you stay with objective on the level of the intellect, what you can logically figure out, to me, renders choices that stay on this logical level and often don't permeate into the fuller being of the character and make it predictable or cliche. And so finding, Mr. Chekhov suggests that we ask the character to reveal its objective, to study it in our imagination, have an imaginary encounter with the character, and have it show us a sequence of movement, repeat the movement, imitate the movement, and try to intuit what is that the character is doing. And so I think when you ask, what is the problem rather than what's my objective, that I get a more playable response. And I also believe that what drives us, what truly motivates us, is not just on an intellectual level. We're looking to create the soul and spirit of this character, and not just the physiology, but the physiology, the physical expression of the character contains the deeper seated driving forces. And just like every day, we don't know what our objective is in every moment of our life. We do things from very, very deeply buried needs and goals. And people, we take something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you have survival on the ground floor, meaning food and shelter. But ultimately, people are risking their lives more because they're not feeling seen and heard. They're doing, they're risking their lives, even committing suicide or killing people in order to make political statements, in order to make social statements. They are getting psychologically out of balance and taking dangerous actions from needs that are not about getting their food, and it's not about getting their shelter. So our current psychological understandings from the 20th century that most people utilize to create their objective statements, to me, miss a huge gap. And so it is helpful to have an understanding of the aim and what for. Mr. Chekhov used the words "what for" in English. What for am I doing this? And I think that's also a better way to work with it than just using the word objective. Objective creates a lot of cliche, in my opinion, and often misses the deeper multidimensional layers that we want to access. So I wouldn't throw it out, but I wouldn't. There are times when you can absolutely go through a whole production without ever really, really connecting, because you connect to a certain image, and the image invisibly, it contains what we call objective, or contains that which the character senses that drives the character to do what it needs to do. So how's that, Joerg?
I think it can be helpful to work with the objective, and it needs some work. Chekhov suggested to do it as a psychological gesture, in terms of a psychological gesture, or as an image, imagination. And I think there are different layers of this objective. One layer is when I look to the character. It's of course my creation as actor. I have to create it. In this way, the objective is not objective. It's not an objective thing. I have to create it. And there's another layer, because all characters in the play or in a scene have a certain artistic function, have an artistic stream they are going on. And this we find mostly given through the text, and through that how the character is led by the writer to through situations. And so we can understand for the play, through the composition analysis, what is the function, or what is in the weaving of the characters in the play, this character's aiming for to fulfill the so-called super objective of the play, or super objective. And so that's one point. Through the composition analysis, I can get a first image about that, what the character is framed for.
Yeah.
In this way, artistically, I mean. And then the second thing is when I look to the scenes or to the imagination of the character in the scene, and have the text imagined, how he is speaking it, how he is relating to the situations. In my imagination, I get a sense, this is here, I get the sense what is on with this artistic personality. And of course, it is out of my resonance to it. And so I have to say it's my creation when I build it up and put it into a psychological gesture, or put it back to a fulfilled imagination. And this is a third part, my work on it, to feel free to play around with it and create one or the other thing and try it out, what could be the objective be. What the character is saying is normally not that what he is really wanting. And this is another layer, but what I understood from, as far as I understood this objective, this is a layer what is in the underground of how the characters are working in the scenes, and how they express their what they have to express with. So, and to go, it's interesting to ask in this direction, what is on with it. It's difficult when one do it only with the intellect, or one try to do it psychologically, psychologic reasons and a psychological understanding of that. I found that very often very difficult. It's really to overcome it in a direction of imagination, or just in a psychological gesture.
Yes, the gesture for me is really important for finding the gesture. I love the way that Mr. Chekhov would just have an actor stand up and talk about the character and watch their movements and reflect back to them what their movements were, because they could see within their movements not what they were saying, as you mentioned, but they could see by the way their hands were moving or their body was moving. He could see what the gesture was that was inside, and then reflect that back to the actor, who could then expand on that and develop that the gesture that was living in their artistic being, and that they were not able to verbalize right on the surface. So very good. There's a question. How has the Chekhov technique influenced your personal life experiences? How did it change, like seeing life from a different perspective? Oh boy. Well, I'll jump in with that. When I began the work, I was in an extremely materialistic phase of my life, and I was an atheist, and I was, living in, I was having a successful marriage and career, but there was always an underlying sense of shame about my work never being good enough. And if I was in a class and I was doing a scene study and I missed a line, I would lose sleep for 3 weeks, beating myself up, ashamed for forgetting a line. And I always felt like there was this something inside of me that was caged. It was locked inside, and it felt like it was right here. It was locked. And I just was going from person to person to person, class to class to class, technique to technique, trying to get someone to sort of unlock it and let this out. And I knew I was a really good director, but I didn't feel I was a very skillful actor. And this Mr. Chekhov's work just sort of melted away the shame. Like, I could be a really bad actor now, and sometimes I can be a really brilliant actor, and it's okay. I don't fall apart. I don't criticize myself for missing lines. And I realize some of the, greatest stories of my career come out of telling about my God, I forgot a whole scene. And I can laugh about it. I can love myself. I can separate myself from my artist. And I developed through Michael Chekhov's work the ability to really communicate with images and to trust. It totally transformed my life, and it opened up the depth of my spiritual worlds, and it made me a much happier person. Like I said, I'm so much more compassionate toward myself and toward others. Of course, when you're compassionate with your own flaws, I understand and accept who I am, and it's different every day, and some days are good and some days are bad, and sometimes I say the right things and sometimes I say things that maybe I could have said differently, and I don't abuse myself. So I'm just eternally grateful. It's completely transformed my life in a wonderful way. Mr. Joerg.
Yeah. It's I was a little bit laughing, not about you. I was laughing about this situation. I would say, of course, it was fully transforming my life when I started with it. But in the other way, before I met it, maybe I was a kind of a, how to say, there's no word for that, idealistic, spiritual illusionist. Oh my God. Yeah, something like that. And when I look back now, it brought me more to reality. Through the Chekhov work, I came really to the reality more. And that means also to the physical reality, and also to that what is beyond the physical reality. So it brought me at least deeper and deeper to the what I would call the reality, what doesn't mean that it is only what we see in our physical world. But that's very much connected with it. And it was and is still always a transformation, ongoing, repeating process. And this happens. In East Germany, that's my funny story. Always I come with East Germany. I learned to separate, to distinguish between my daily life work and my official being, and my inner world and my inner development and my inner things. So I thought that I have to learn to distinguish between that. This is in one room and the other is in the other room. When I go to the work, then I go to the work there, and what I'm doing has nothing to do with the work. And maybe that was on one hand helpful later to understand that I didn't try directly to bring the Chekhov work into my personal life. It happened more step by step, that I sensed, okay, because of this both spaces I had developed and was a crossing from one to the other, then it came, I realized that this is influencing the work I have done with the Chekhov training, that this is influencing also the other side, step by step. That was a interesting process and transformation to come closer to the reality.
Beautiful, beautiful. From Julia, my colleagues who work according to Stanislavski, thinking that Chekhov is only for talented people, or they say that this is not a system at all, that it is only part of the Stanislavski system. What do you think about this?
One can think as one like, and it depends how much experience one has with it. So, and I think, as I said before, it's with a Joseph Beuys. Joseph Beuys says the other thing, everybody is an artist. And he says, of course, not that doesn't mean that everybody becomes a painter or everybody is a world famous actor. But Chekhov is possible for everybody who would like to work in a creative way. And this is what I have experienced over all the years. So I wouldn't say it's only for the most talented people in the world. Even when Chekhov speaks about that the talented actor, an actor needs a talent, that's right for some stages in this process. But the work itself is helpful for everybody who would like to become creative in this way, as an artistic person in life. And that's my opinion. And the other thing with the Stanislavski thing, it's you can't push them against each other. And on the other hand, you can also see that something happened out of their these two geniuses met, and then these two geniuses had from one point of their life a different life situation. And I would say, as tragic it was for Chekhov on one side, it was on the other side much more tragic for Stanislavski to having to stay in Russia. And so he was not free anymore in the later years to work it more and more in a free way out what he had already understood. And Chekhov itself speaks so nicely about that when they would have found the right situation to working together, then they both together would have created the most important thing for the acting. So I wouldn't play them against each other, but on the other hand, I would say that Chekhov was going in some points beyond Stanislavski.
Yes, I have several different thoughts, like you, Joerg, a couple of different sections in response to this question. So let me just sort of start on the technique itself. When Mr. Chekhov was teaching, certainly in Hollywood, most of the people that he was teaching already had the Stanislavski system as it was being put out, the system of analysis. And Chekhov, you can even hear it in his audio tapes, acknowledges that he feels the system of analysis is quite solid. And so he did not seek to meaningfully discard, like he intentionally discards the concept of recalling your personal memories.
Absolutely, yeah.
But he embraces the system of analysis. And when Chekhov went on to teach, he taught what was different and what they did not know.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't teach the system of analysis to people who already knew it. Those students who went on to teach Michael Chekhov's work went on to teach it without the system of analysis to people who didn't know the system of analysis. And the consequence of that is, you can say, Michael Chekhov's technique without the basic system of analysis is a toolbox without a manual on how to use the tools. So fortunately, Michael Chekhov knew when he was teaching Malin Powers that she didn't know the system of analysis. And so he gave her sort of his fundamental structures of the system of analysis. And they are apparent. You can see them in many places if you know that he supports that through the questions that he asks and the way he's leading us through, particularly in chapter 7 of On the Technique of Acting, chapter 8 of To the Actor, and chapter 8 then of On the Technique of Acting, where you get quite a bit of the structure of analysis in general. So the Chekhov box of tools without the system of analysis can create a phenomenal artist and is good for anybody, which, basically the Stanislavski system doesn't have the breadth of appeal, healing, awakening of creative artistry in the way that it went out to the world. Whereas the Chekhov technique, these tools and exercises can be used to awaken anyone's creativity for any feeling, any means. And so they are different in that regard. When we look at, for me, the fundamental distinction in terms of the artistic perspective of Stanislavski versus Chekhov is that Stanislavski is looking at the world through the subjective eye of the actor. Through my personality, I look at the character, and my responses to how I'm going to create this character are closely aligned with my personality. And so it's very subjective. The word I means I, Lisa, the everyday self, the everyday persona of the actor. Whereas Mr. Chekhov looks at, in my opinion, then objective. He seeks to create an objective image of the character through your higher I, through the higher spiritual being that is able to have that split consciousness that Joerg was speaking of earlier. So when, aside from these fundamental concepts of creating through the lower I subjectively or creating through the higher I objectively, the merging of the work of Stanislavski and Chekhov works very, very well. And Chekhov honors his Stanislavski underpinnings. And I believe that Stanislavski was highly influenced also by Michael Chekhov. I believe his method of physical actions and his active analysis and things like that were all part of inspired, co-created, influenced by Michael Chekhov. And as Joerg said, I think that the evolution, I think the evolution of what could have been had they remained able to work together would have been a fascinating gift. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's not fully to answer now here. I read that here that somebody wrote that my colleagues who work according to Stanislavski thinking that Chekhov is only for talented people, or they say that this is not a system at all. This is a question, and one can ask back how much they have understood or studied it. It is, Chekhov is absolutely holistic. It's a holistic method, a holistic system. It's a holistic being, because everything is very much connected with all the other things. And this is, of course, not so easy to understand when one is only reading the book. One has to do the work, and when one starts the work, then one realizes that with each repeating and any exercises, one comes to another layer, to another level. And until it happens that one comes from one training element or one tool to the other, this is not the very first beginning how it is working. And it is, of course, in this way not a system like a logical system. It's not logical, it's absolutely human. The human being also is not logical as being, as a full being. It's always a full life of contradictions and of opposite processes. And this Chekhov technique in this way, or this Chekhov way of trying to explore the world of artistic characters what we have when we look to acting, for the world of artistic, created people. So he tried to give through that way of these exercises, the way of the training, the tools itself. I understood that he gives for that something to recreate, something in an artistic way, what we can already find also in life. It's a holistic, humanistic technique.
Yes. Beautifully stated, Joerg. Beautiful. Yeah. You see that we have a question, where is the psychological knowledge coming from? Do you work with people from outside in order to understand it? I'm not real sure about this, what the question means. Do you have an idea, Joerg?
No, I have the question, what is the meaning of that psychological knowledge? What does it mean? Is this person online that this person could say what is the meaning of that? Where is the psychological knowledge coming from? If you if I understand that in a way, this deeper understanding, what I also tried to express with my funny term of the human holistic human understanding, in this way it comes from Steiner. It's not a psychologic, as we have this term in our time, very much used. The understanding of this, how a soul is working and what are the forces in the soul, and how the combination of this, meeting these forces in the soul, this understanding, I think this is included in Chekhov's work, and this is coming very deeply from Steiner.
These fundamental concepts of these soul forces of thinking, feeling, and willing were also present in they're present on Stanislavski's chart of work, and there's evidence that Stanislavski had read Steiner in Steiner's work and was connected with that during before he actually began the first studio. And so there's that's just an interesting thing to understand, that they both, Steiner and Chekhov, may have shared some level of inspiration from Steiner. So that's a very interesting thing. In one way of understanding this psychological knowledge, or looking at this question, I don't know, but to say I personally have studied many different aspects of psychology, and studied a great deal of Jungian psychology and subpersonality psychologies, and different aspects of working with mental health. And so Michael Chekhov's work is very helpful for bringing people with mental health challenges into greater balance. So there are a lot of ways to interweave the work of Chekhov's exercises and system into producing greater psychological well-being in any human being. So I mentioned that there.
Okay, I don't.
I don't know if that had anything to do with the question, but Thank you all so much for your questions. Very, very appreciative of all of you and of all the expression of gratitude that you have posted in the chat. And we're just about to wrap it up here. So if there's anybody who would like to say anything, I'm going to unmute you all. So Joerg, are there any closing words you'd like to offer?
Maybe there's anybody from the audience in this way who would like to ask a question. Can they speak also? Or
Yes, they
don't
can.
know.
I'm going to unmute them all. So everybody can talk. Anybody can talk.
So if they are from these people, something,
Yes.
anything what they would like to express or ask.
Yes.
Just to say thank you very much. It was very, very generous. It was very insightful, and thank you. And I hope it will be more.
Very good.
Hello. Ophir.
Thank you so much for sharing so much insights.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was wonderful to see you and to hear you and to be somehow so close tonight.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much from Karelia. It was so great. It was wonderful. Thank you. I was so glad to see Lisa and Joerg. I miss you. And I hope that we will meet in February and with Lisa in Berlin. Thank you for your knowledges, and it was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much. They're like a big family all together this evening, or not even in the American, and such great experience. Thank you so much.
Beautiful.
Vadim wanted to say something. Is that right? Can I read that in the right way here? Okay. We will meet anyway. So,
Olivia.
good. For me, it was a very first experience to do that in such a way. And maybe I have to learn something, how to manage it.
Thank you.
But
thank you, everyone. And thank you for the translation, Marianna, Mariel. My goddaughter.
Organizing all that.
And we'll do some more. And if you guys send us some, send us questions that you'd love for us to discuss, and we'll just generate some more and spread the word. And we will be posting this, and we'll let you know where it can be reviewed and where you can share it with people.
Yeah, Lisa, everybody is so much looking forward to see you in Russia because we told so much about you. Hopefully one day.
Okay, one day. That would be great. That would be great.
Thank you very, very much for this beautiful evening. It was a pleasure to see you both. And thank you for your wisdom, for your words. We have to definitely do it more often because it's like priceless. It feels so good, like we're sitting in one table together again. Thank you very much, Joerg. Thank you very much, Lisa. We love you very, very much. You know this. Mwah, mwah, mwah.
Thank you, Mariel.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Wonderful that you were joining, and so, yeah, maybe we can make it one time more. Thanks a lot, and I hope we see each other also in life.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll look forward to more.